Thank you so much for joining me here. I really appreciate everyone's support for my channel and their understanding about what's going on with the strike. I have confirmed that the Waltons is on the list of companies or productions that were on strike. So I cannot do more of my usual content. So I appreciate that how many of you have said you are interested in other things I can talk about in the meantime. So today I'm going to touch on a question to do with directing. So thank you so much for being here. This question is from Ironside Van. I'd love to hear and learn more about your work as a director of both live stage productions as well as television, whether the strike is impacting directors in particular, and my experience with directors that I've worked with and how those have maybe helped me. The directors are not on strike right now. I don't know if there is a time. I know I have seen that this strike is the first time the writers and actors have been out on strike at the same time since about 1960. I don't recall if there was a time where the actors and directors were on strike at the same time. Of course, as any of those key fields impact work. So if the directors are out and production can't happen, then it doesn't. As if the actors are out, then it impacts the writers and directors. So all those unions, all of the unions that are involved in pulling this together impact each other, because if it's a union production, then all of those unions are necessary in order to get the work done. As far as my work as a director and what's been influenced, there's a lot I've learned about as an actor from the types of questions that directors have asked me, and then a recognition of how that comes into play in directing. A lot of my influences actually came from my time in Canada, working as an actor and as working behind the scenes up there. There was a director I worked with a dinner theater up there, and he was terrific. I just remember him asking me one time, he wouldn't necessarily tell an actor how to do a scene, which is something I've kind of learned, that you aren't meant to give actors line reading, say it like this, that it's to help the actor find their interpretation of the character and to hone in on what it's about. So you feed them information, you ask them questions, you find how they relate to that character so you can make it personal enough that it's believable. And I just remember this one director one time asking me with certain lines, he would say, well, what are you playing in that moment? What's your intention? What are you trying to accomplish with that line? Kind of what's your intention for it? And in a couple of cases with the line, I responded that, oh, well, I'm trying to do this and this and this. And he kind of said, well, pick one, which said to me that I was sort of diluting what I was doing and it wasn't specific enough. And so that was a really good thing for me. Doing the series, I knew the characters so well that I pretty much always knew what I was playing. I knew the relationships, I knew things like that. Whereas when I would then enter into work for other characters, I didn't have the history and the background of them, so I had to build that for myself. So those types of questions were questions that helped me hone the character, and from the outside, the director could see where he felt it got a little vague. So that's something I remembered both as an actor and as a director, when I felt that an actor maybe wasn't being specific enough, that I could maybe help guide them into what that moment was about and maybe give them more information about the overall picture so they could decide what their character's point of view was within there. So that director made a big influence on me. Also, a director I worked with in productions of Hello, Dolly a couple times, a director out of New York that I adore, Colleen Heffernan, and I loved her positivity. Even in the beginning, kind of coming in and thinking, okay, I'm a little nervous about coming in to do this role. This is a big role, a very flamboyant role, which I felt was very different from the types of things I'd done, and maybe how I see myself personally. There's people I know, and we all know, that sort of walk in and take over a room, and you just know they're there, and they're the life of the party. And I've always been a little more of an observer, and yes, I can be in and be engaged and be very social. I don't consider that I'm not social, but I wouldn't say I am a big, huge personality. And I felt that Dolly was that kind of character. So finding how to connect with that character. And Colleen always made me feel confident. She always made me feel like whatever choices I was making were good choices and they worked. So there was just this eternal positive reinforcement, which then I felt like it was collaborative in helping to build the character and that I could make mistakes. And I think that's a big thing as a director that I learned was actors need a safe space in which to explore and do their best work. Otherwise, you do the safe things because you don't want to do something stupid that's, going to, have the director making fun of you or criticizing you or yelling at you or any number of things that can happen with directors that have a different perspective on. Same thing with acting teachers. They can have a different perspective of how they feel they're going to pull a performance out of you. And maybe that works for some actors. It's not the way I like to work as an actor. And so I choose to try to work with actors the way I like to be worked with as a director. So those are that's my perspective on working. I can't say I've always accomplished it as a director. I have worked sometimes on shows I've directed, and I look back now and I sincerely want to apologize to some of the actors who I, was short with, or, I was critical of, or I wasn't supportive enough of. And I look back and I'm not proud of myself for those moments. And I feel like it wasn't well done of me. So I try to take those lessons and do better moving forward. So for anyone who might have been on the receiving end of one of those, I'm very sorry. Who else? Oh, a director I worked with up in Canada, Martin Wood. He directed an episode of a show I did up there, and I loved working with him. I loved the way he spoke with me, his direction, and I thought he was very perceptive as a director. And there was a scene that was very emotional, and I did a take, and I could tell it wasn't really. I didn't feel like it went well. I felt that it wasn't my best take, and he just sort of came over and said something very simple to me that just spoke my language. And he just said something like, drop it deeper, which to me just was like to connect deeper with what it was about, to not sort of float on the surface and indicate, like, sort of, I'm going to show you what I'm feeling, as opposed to allowing it to be more real and to be more spontaneous and not trying to make it something. That, anyway, it made sense to me in the moment, and I always really appreciated that and felt that his direction really was simple but to the point and helped me have a better performance. And I appreciated him giving me that opportunity to do another take and do a better take, even though television moves so fast. So there are points when, as a director, if you can't get what you're looking for in a short period of time, you simply have to move on. There isn't time in television to go over and over and over it. So as a director, you're trying to get together a whole list of things, a toolbox, so to speak, of things and ways to communicate to actors, so that if one thing doesn't resonate with the actor, maybe another one does. So you just need that collection of things in how you speak to an actor. And I find I pull from my experiences as an actor, and also as having taught and coached acting, that I pull from what worked for me, what do I use, what works, and which things might work with an actor. And fortunately, having coached and taught, I've had a chance to work with actors where I didn't have such a tight time frame, so I could find my way around that. So those things have been very helpful to me. And I taught predominantly in Canada. Then when I started working with the theater in Canada, which I'll go into more detail in another segment, I had not worked really behind the scenes as a writer or director. So when I started doing that, because it was a partner, so we worked together. He took the lead on a lot of stuff, and that allowed me to sit back and watch how he put things together. And that was very helpful because it was sort of a hands-on apprenticeship. And that was very helpful to me. It was very helpful in watching the physical building of the pictures on the stage. What sort of pictures were we creating? Because unlike film, where it's more about the camera's tighter and you're cutting, and whereas with yes, ultimately it gets edited together for a whole visual picture, but on stage you're creating pictures all the time. The audience can see the entire stage. Yes, lighting can narrow down what you're looking at, and that's one of the things you use lighting for. But otherwise, when the whole stage is there and you have actors all over, where do you want them? What gives you a good visual for the audience? So I learned a lot about that. Then there were very specific things, like a director I worked with when I was young and going through a bit of a rebellious stage and trying to assert, I wanted people to respect me and think and give me value, and I felt I wasn't getting it. And so I was trying to demand it, rather than just do my job and let my actions speak for themselves. And this director kind of just had a chat with me, and he said, he just warned me against getting a reputation for being difficult to work with. He said, it doesn't matter, how many credentials you have or whatever, you start getting that reputation, people won't hire you. And I really took that to heart and recognized that really the work and the professionalism needs to speak for itself, and to try not to worry about the rest of it. Fielder Cook, who directed The Homecoming, he taught me some technical things about how sometimes your movements as an actor have to be slower so the camera can follow you. If you move too fast, the camera loses you in the lens, and it's just not a pretty picture. So sometimes it can feel awkward as an actor, but it looks good for the camera. And then the first time I directed for TV, I had a wonderful cinematographer I worked with, Marvin Rush. This was also up in Canada. And I was very nervous coming in to direct this several episodes of this cable TV show. He had a lot of professional experience. He was currently, at that point, he was doing a show called Hell on Wheels. He had done a lot of the Star Trek shows as a cinematographer. And so when I came in, he said, "Don't worry." He said, I have helped a lot of actors as first-time directors get through that. And so he was a wonderful mentor and helped me learn, but never made me feel inadequate or unprepared. And it was a really nice team. And I thought he helped make me look good. So I really appreciated that. So things like that have been really key. And Marvin is also a director, so his eye for a lot of those things was very useful as well. So that's what I can tell you in this sort of brief overview of directing and some of the influences for me on directing. And I will dig more into that in another segment. I will be back with more on these various different topics, and I hope to see you then. Thanks for watching.